In a world that increasingly encourages mediocrity, the harsh truth is that the level of financial success you achieve within your lifetime is directly determined by one thing: your ability to take consistent action in the face of overwhelming resistance and adversity. Now, this is an easy thing to say, but an incredibly difficult thing to do. But if you actually focus during this short lesson, you will learn something that most people never do: how to actually take consistent and relentless action, especially in the midst of adversity, using a tool known as resistance alchemy, which will make your financial goals, or any goals for that matter, really the only logical outcome. Now, if you're new here, before I dive into these amazing companion documents which I have collated here, it's important that we always start a lesson on the same page. So I always like to start off with definitions. And the one thing we need to define today is, well, what is a resistance alchemy? It's simply the ability to take action in the presence of overwhelming emotional resistance by transforming avoidance into fuel. It's important to understand this isn't suppression, this is conversion. You see, alchemy is actually this ancient practice of people trying to convert lead or copper into gold or any other precious metals. And ultimately, it's a process of conversion. We're trying to convert the avoidance into drive, into further action. But of course, the logical question after defining it is, why does this matter? This kind of sounds a bit wishy-washy. What has this got anything to do? How's this important in terms of achieving my financial goals and winning in business? Well, to answer that question, I'd probably go further. I wouldn't just say resistance alchemy is important. I would actually say it's the only thing that is important. Everything else is a distraction. It's noise when it comes to actually achieving your financial goals. Now, to understand why I make this bold claim and achieve this level of clarity, it's important we step back to first principles thinking. Now, we're all here, of course, because we're trying to achieve the goals or the intentions that we have in terms of how we want to live our life. The achievement of these goals, whether they're financial or anything, we can consider that success. If you achieve something, you have achieved, or you've successfully done it. So we can call that success. Let's break that thing that we're all trying to optimize, success, down to its real core mechanics, its irreducible components. What is required and what isn't? Well, if we really do that, we come to one line: a consistent sequence of actions towards a defined target. That's it. And this is something I repeat practically in every single video that I have, and it's something you will need to be reminded of the rest of your life, because humans have this proclivity towards shiny objects. It's called shiny object syndrome. You're always looking for the next thing, the next shiny bullet that's going to save you in the next book you read or the next video that you watch. You must understand the secret is that there is no secret. The difference between you and any version of you that lives your dream life is simply the action you haven't taken yet. The difference between you and every billionaire, actor, artist, name it, is simply the action you haven't taken yet. There is nothing else going on. That is everything. It's consistent action towards a defined target, which in this case would be your desired reality, bridging the gap between where you're currently at and where you want to be. That's it. And so using the process known as inversion, it's because if we look at consistency, it's kind of this big nebulous thing that's spread out over a long time period and you can't really observe it. It's very difficult to just say, become consistent and successfully do that. And so the way we can better embody this requirement for us to achieve something is through inversion. And the inversion in this case would be avoiding inconsistency. And so what we want to look at, and this is all in the proof of showing how important resistance alchemy is we want to identify, well, what causes inconsistency? Because whatever causes inconsistency within this chain of action here, whatever causes that inconsistency, we can label as the failure mechanism. This is whatever causes people to fail. Because if you think about it, if you have failed at something, by definition, you must have been inconsistent, because there are two options. Either you're still taking action towards it, and great, it's just a matter of time, and that could be years, which is why consistency is so difficult, or you've quit, and therefore you've failed. And so what we want to identify is whatever causes this inconsistency, the failure mechanism, and we simply want to remove its influence over us. And so, well, what causes inconsistency? Well, I can tell you for a fact, inconsistency doesn't happen when everything is going well, when it's the blue skies and it's warm and you just started your business and you're setting up the logo and the website and you're motivated and you're confident and you're certain this time it will work. But of course, inconsistency doesn't happen then. It's when the winter of adversity arrives, the fog of negative emotion engulfs you and everything is going wrong. Every cell and fiber in your body is telling you to turn around. Overwhelming levels of anxiousness, stress, doubt, fear, or even apathy, a lack of motivation or drive. You're questioning why you even started this in the first place. And eventually, under all of that negative emotion, that overwhelming resistance, you start to avoid the work. You start to go back on this initial intention. You start to do essentially a U-turn, which we can kind of see over here, where you start the action and then you just sort of turn back. And this is what 99 out of 100 people do. Most people fail to achieve financial goals, fail to succeed in business. This is why this happens. And the failure mechanism, the reason they are inconsistent, is emotional avoidance, as you can see here. That's it. And so it's emotional avoidance which is the real enemy here. Sun Tzu said, know thy enemy. We need to understand this. So resistance is what we're encountering. Now, resistance is all forms of negative emotion. And this can also be stuff like avoidance, procrastination, perfectionism, distractions. These are also emotional states disguised as logic. You see, emotion plays a very significant role. It's a large shareholder determining the actions that you take. And so when you experience overwhelming resistance or negative emotion that could include fear, doubt, anxiety, sadness, hopelessness, anger, for example, as well, for long periods of time, when you experience it, eventually it convinces you to turn back on your initial intention, because what emotion does is it clouds your judgment. Well, it's like a fog that descends on you, and actually your frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, your ability to make executive decisions like short-term hardship, which is what this is, for long-term gain. This consistent action is hard. You will encounter resistance. You will encounter adversity by definition, because you're crossing over your comfort zone. By definition, you're doing something you've never done before. Otherwise, you would have already had it. And so this is something guaranteed. This is something guaranteed to come. And so the resistance is anything that we encounter along the way. And what happens? We encounter it over and over again, and eventually we just begin to avoid. We go back on that initial intention. We do a U-turn. And whatever rational intention we set, we go back on it and we run straight back to our current reality. This is what happens to the vast majority of people. Whether you admit it to yourself or not, you quit, you were inconsistent. There is no other way. I know there may be loads of excuses or justifications for why that happened. You wrapped it up, you made it look pretty so it didn't hurt your ego. And I'm saying this to me more than anything. In the end of the day, you quit. And that's the only way. And so the failure mechanism is emotional avoidance. Now, through this, you can begin to understand why I said resistance alchemy is really the only thing that matters. Because if we can be emotionally resistant, as in we can control negative emotion and continue to take action through it reliably, if we can do that reliably with resistance alchemy, then what we have done is removed the failure mechanism. Emotional avoidance is no longer influential over us. Therefore, there is no chance of us stopping. There is no quitting. The failure mechanism has been removed, and therefore success is the only outcome. This is why I said it's the only thing that is important. And so the solution is resistance alchemy. And it's what I call a meta skill, meaning it's a skill that affects all other skills. You see, if you learn resistance alchemy, or you develop that skill, or we can call this emotional resiliency as well, You become more consistent as a result. You become more confident. You become more certain. You become more disciplined. And so learning this one skill of resistance alchemy allows you to dominate in so many different areas. It has this outsized impact. And it is the real solution to taking consistent action and overcoming the failure mechanism of emotional avoidance. And so how do we do this? Practically, how we do this? Well, it's important to understand all sort of psychological terms. Take confidence, for example. People say you've just got to be more confident. Well, what does that mean? It's sort of nebulous. Well, all of these psychological terms can be broken down to a series of behaviors. So confidence, for example, can be broken down into maybe 100 separate behaviors. 3 of them, for example, may be articulating your thoughts better, or making sure that your posture is accurate, or maybe it's slowing down your movements. I don't know, I'm not a confidence expert, but that may be behaviors involved in this word known as confidence. Emotional resiliency and resistance alchemy is the same thing. It's just a sequence of behaviors. And so what I've done is I've created something called the DISARM protocol. This is something that I use for myself every single day of my life. And it is a series, essentially a sequence of actions that we go through, a series of behaviors that allow us to embody emotional resiliency, allow us to alchemize the avoidance which resistance creates, and allows us to turn it into fuel, gold, lead into gold. That's what alchemy is. And that's what the DISARM protocol is. And it's known as a backronym, which is an acronym, but the actual word displaying each step is a word in itself. And so it goes DISARM. Detection, isolation, simplify, alignment, respond, memorize. Now what you can see here is the actual document which I read every single day of my life, every single morning, because this is a protocol that I deploy multiple times a week now. But at the start, when I made this a couple years ago, because I was being so inconsistent, so emotionally susceptible and weak, quite frankly, that was causing so much inconsistency, I would go through this multiple times a day. And so we're going to go through this entire process now. And so we deploy the DISARM protocol specifically when we encounter any sort of resistance or adversity or hardship. These are all the same things. The negative emotion which causes that U-turn, that avoidance, anything that is making you avoid the work. For different people, it has different flavors. It could be apathy, lack of motivation, drive, or procrastination, or distraction, or fear, anxiety, stress, or sadness, or anger, or hopelessness, whatever flavor it has for you, and there could be multiple. For me, it's probably maybe 3 or 2 that are the main ones for me. The first step is we have to realize it's there, and we need to use a skill called metacognition. The first step is detection. You have to name the resistance out loud as soon as it occurs, as soon as you really feel it and you're going like, oh, I really don't want to do any work right now. I don't want to continue to take action today. Maybe we'll start tomorrow, whatever it is, that excuse. You have to realize it's there using a skill known as metacognition, which is something I talked about in a video, something along the lines of make your unconscious conscious. This is about becoming aware of all of these unconscious thoughts, because if you do not even notice that you're feeling certain emotions, you stand no chance. And so we need to be metacognitive of what we're thinking and feeling, and when the resistance arrives, which it will inevitably do when you bypass that comfort zone on that sequence of actions to bridge that gap from where you're currently at to where you're going, you just name it. I am feeling fear. I am procrastinating. I am feeling anger, whatever it is. You can say it out loud if you want, or you can say it in your head. You simply just need to notice and name. That's all that the first step, detection, contains. And then once we do that, we move on to isolation, which is the second step. Now, this is very simple as well. As soon as you name the emotion, you now need to enter the present moment and neutralize it. We do this by simply sitting down, ideally, and I'm just observing the emotion. Cease trying to solve it, cease trying to think about it or judge why it's happening. End all of that. No intentional thinking, problem solving, just observe the emotion and let the body process it. Stay until the intensity drops by 80 to 90%. Because what happens here is when we begin to observe the emotion, we step back. Because when you're stuck, when the emotion arises, you automatically become the victim, the person experiencing it, and you get stuck in the fog of that emotion. That's where it begins to influence your behavior, and you go back on that initial intention. If we can step back and become the observer rather than the experiencer, we begin to get that rationality back. And if you don't fuel this emotion with thought or with behavior in any way, it will neutralize. The intensity will drop. This may take 30 seconds or 30 minutes. It doesn't matter. The important thing here is we need to enter back into the zone of rationality where we can begin to make accurate decisions for our goal, for what we truly want in life. And so you need to wait until it drops in intensity significantly and you settle into calm. We do this by accessing the present moment and observing said emotion. Now, once the intensity has dropped, we move on to the third step. S, simplify. Now, you simply just need to understand what is causing this. What am I specifically fearing? What am I feeling fear about? What am I procrastinating over? What am I so angry about? Why do I feel so sad? Just name the thing that's actually causing it. Nobody really does this, and you realize how ridiculous it is quite quickly. And all you need to do is debunk it, as in you just need to understand why it's irrational. You see, emotion in itself is subjective. It's a lens that we apply onto an objective world. And so it's always going to be inaccurate. It's just not real. It's always an illusion, and you need to debunk that illusion, at least intellectually in your mind. Because he who has a why can bear almost any how. You need to give a reason for why you're going to continue to go through this negative emotion. A reason for the suffering makes it a whole lot easier. That's, again, very simple. And then we move on to step 4. A, alignment. So in the second step, isolation, what happened with our emotional state, our state of being, is we went from sort of this really negative emotional state, whatever negative emotion engulfed your thinking, and we brought ourselves up to neutral. And now what we need to do is bring ourselves above neutral into that zone of confidence, calm, certainty, because ultimately, as I said earlier, emotion plays a significant role in terms of what action you do or don't take. And so if we can bring ourselves back into that really confident self, we're going to start to take better, we're increasing the probability that we take the correct course of action. And so I do this personally through a short mental affirmation where I just go aligned in my head. That's all I say, because it's something that I've trained a response over. Every time I do something well and I do a good job, I just say aligned in my mind. And so when I say it in these situations, it just brings my emotional state, elevates it a little bit, and it does help. For you, it may be listening to a certain song or watching a short clip or an edit or some sort of hypnosis track or visualization. For different people, it's different things. Just find something that really gets you back into the spirit of conquering the world. That's the sort of feeling that you want. And then the second step of alignment is so important, because if you can't find anything that automatically gets you into a certain state, that's fine. The shortcut we can do this is by feeling genuine gratitude for this negative emotion. Now, why would we feel gratitude for something that feels so painful or like suffering in the moment? Well, the point is, this negative emotion is providing us an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to break the illusion of this emotion in itself, an opportunity to break whatever it is that you're feeling. Now, if you continue to abide by this emotion, you can continue to behave along with what it wants you to do, which is going to be avoidance, is going to continue to grow in strength. But if you take action through it, every time you do this, the intensity will drop inevitably. And so this is simply offering us an opportunity to make progress towards the goal, because we're building up supporting beliefs of a new identity and breaking down limiting beliefs of an old identity. So this is really just an opportunity to grow. You really want this end outcome, right? This dream life, lifestyle, whatever it is. Well, this negative emotion is providing the opportunity for that. So you should feel genuine gratitude and thanks for it. That really flips the dynamic of the situation. Now this negative emotion has no influence over you once you feel gratitude for it, because you kill off any remaining negativity that could try and influence your behavior. Now, once we've done steps 1 to 4, we go to 5, which is respond. Very simply take action, but specifically take action beeline towards whatever you identified in step 3 that caused this emotional outbreak. Whatever the thing that is just you're avoiding, That's where the magic is found, and so you need to beeline towards it. Eliminate all distractions and just take action. There's nothing else I can say with that. If you don't take the action, none of this is really matters at all. This emotion will continue to control you. If you want to conquer your emotions, you must take action through them. And this response is important. But step 1 to 4, make that response possible. Because when people say, well, what do I do when I feel X and I don't want to take action? And they say, well, you've got to take action. That's like prescribing the symptom as the cure. This person can't take action and you're telling them to take action. We're doing step 1 to 4 to prime our emotional state of mind in a direction where we now bias action and it becomes the obvious outcome or the obvious next step. And so once we take action, we want to memorize, because ultimately this whole process of trying to achieve change in our life really starts with belief. It starts and ends with belief. Belief is everything. You know, your identity is the king of all. And so when it comes to shifting belief, or just the identity you have, which is just the beliefs contained about yourself, we need to provide evidence. So it's important that we memorize this example. You know, when we respond to something, it's important that we revisit it at some point and say, look, I experienced this emotion, whatever it is for you, and I took action through it. It wasn't bad at all. I overcame it. And it wasn't what I thought it was. That illusion that was that on the other side of the emotion, when I first experienced it, everything felt impossible. But when I actually did it, it wasn't that bad. You just want to remind yourself of that and reflect on it, because that will actually accelerate the process of building beliefs that support the goal you are trying to achieve. Now, for me personally, I do a voice journal every single day, morning and night, where I just speak into voice memos. I don't like writing. I just sort of reflect on what happened in the day, what went well, even better if, whatever. But when I do this, I have a tracker where anytime I have an instance where I deploy this entire protocol, I write it down and I just say, what time was it and what did I feel? And then I go ahead and reflect and rewire. I go and memorize it in the PM voice journal of that day. And so I always make sure that I revisit these circumstances to really ensure that I'm breaking this illusion for the next time. So the next time I take action, the intensity of the emotion drops and drops and drops. It gives us that opportunity to break the avoidance, the emotion. Now, this is so powerful, man. Like, if someone showed this to me 3 years ago, I would have colonized the universe, because ultimately, if you have a proper tool that you can deploy to become emotionally resilient, this is all the behaviors you need. Everything in CBT and psychology and neuroscience is all condensed into this. This is everything that you need. It's like your shield that can shield you from all this negative emotion and resistance, which is trying to keep you the same, trying to make you U-turn on what you initially set out in life. This is how we bridge the gap between current reality and desired reality. This is how we achieve immense levels of consistency. And I can say this with such confidence, because if I hadn't discovered this, if I haven't built this for myself, I would still be completely inconsistent and in this cycle of self-interference and self-sabotage. Because if you do not control your emotions, they will control you. Now, it's important to say, at first, you're going to have to print out a document or have some document at hand where you can go through this step by step. But eventually, the more you repeat it, the more automatic it will become. So at the moment, I can just rack through this in like 30 seconds. It may look like something that's long, but I just wanted to explain it in depth so you understand how this works. But this isn't something that should take so long. But even if it does, so what? Consistency is everything. As I said, everything else is noise and distraction. And so if you have to spend 2 hours a day going through the DISARM protocol to achieve levels of consistency, that's what it must be, because consistency beats intensity every single day of the week. If you cannot be consistent, nothing else matters. And so you need to lean on this, use it as your shield to defend you from that winter of adversity, and it will change your life like it has done for me. I hope you found this valuable. If you did find this lesson valuable, it is your lucky day, because I'm going to link another lesson which builds directly on this, and you can see it on the screen now. I'll see you in there. Godspeed.